What if I told you some players in World of Tanks might be seeing more than you ever could? Not because they're better, but because the game is showing them things you're not supposed to see. Last week I was playing the tutorial mode for World of Tanks called Topography. Here you have to complete scenarios by driving around on different maps and destroy enemy tanks along the way. I noticed that they all had a laser pointing at you, which indicated where they were looking. And that is when it clicked. This is not just a tutorial feature, this is information the game is clearly capable of showing. If you were to translate this feature into random battles, it would give you an insane advantage in terms of awareness, and it occurred to me, if this feature is in the game, can it not just be unlocked by cheaters and be used in random battles? So to answer this question, I decided to find out as much information as possible and get to the bottom of this thing. Many people complain about cheaters in the game, and even I have encountered very suspicious behavior recently, and as we were discussing this on one of my recent streams, a viewer has reached out shortly after, saying that he checked out some of these cheats and he offered to send me a few clips he recorded. He said he only used it in warm-up matches against bots because he didn't want to grief and ruin other players' games. Good on you, buddy. After opening and checking the clips he sent me, it became clear that this goes way deeper than I thought. So today, I'm going to answer you whether cheats in World of Tanks constitute a real problem or not. Welcome to the dark world of cheating. To understand cheating in World of Tanks, you first need to understand how the game actually works. To start things off, let's lay down the fundamentals to make it clear. World of Tanks is very different from common FPS games. This is because most calculations happen on the server and your game, the client, only receives limited data. This is why traditional hacks such as wall hacks, God mode, teleportation don't work, and cheats instead focus on information and automation. This game is 100% server side. Cheats have access to the same data you have, says a Reddit explanation. But this is not entirely true, and this is where things start to fall apart. And I am about to prove this guy wrong. Based on this, it is important to know that cheats in World of Tanks don't create new data, they just extract, interpret, and visualize hidden data better. Now, what does this mean in practice? Now let's get into the part that actually matters, and what these cheats look like in real battles. There are the so-called information cheats, such as enemies' last known position markers, which are usually available on the minimap to everyone. But there are cheats out there that leave their tank outline on your screen even after they got unspotted. This is not an incredibly useful feature, as they could have easily repositioned since their last known location, but it can still be a little bit useful to determine what angle they were looking at, and also for blind shooting. And this is where it stops being just helpful and starts becoming genuinely unfair. One of the most broken ones out there is the so-called destroyed object tracking, which is literally like wall hack if you think about it. There are multiple destructible objects on all maps in World of Tanks, and as you drive through a shed or knock down a little tree, this cheat places a marker on your minimap, as well as marks the location on your screen, showing you clearly where there is enemy activity. This obviously doesn't tell you which enemy tank is exactly there, but still gives you an insane amount of advantage in all scenarios that I can possibly think of, directly influencing your decision making and the way you interpret and play the game. Wall hack. This one is pretty self-explanatory, but unlike in other FPS games such as CS2, it only works when the enemy tanks are spotted. You can clearly see their outline even behind obstacles, and you can tell where they are aiming and where they are going to pop up, making it super easy for you to track enemy movements and prepare your shot way in advance. I consider this one pretty broken, to be honest, because it gives you so much info and saves you a ton of time that you would spend on figuring out whether they are going to be visible soon or not. At this point, you are not reacting anymore, you are predicting everything before it even happens. The cheat also shows the penetratable zones on the tank, so you can literally just bypass Wargaming's armor flashlight and aim directly at their weak spots, which are highlighted in white. Reload cheat. There is also the reload cheat, which shows you how many shells autoloaders have fired or how much time is left for someone to reload, which is again information that you should only have access to when you're actively counting their shots, and you should in no way know across the map how many shells an enemy tank has. This cheat also apparently is accurate, but I have doubts about this one, since I'm not sure if it takes equipment and crew skills into account when doing the calculation of the reload time. The next cheat is called artillery tracer tracking, which literally puts down a massive ball on where the enemy art is located, making you able to blind shoot much easily and also reposition better in case you don't have line of sight to avoid getting hit. Ever since Wargaming introduced the Commander Crew perk, sound detection, and improved visuals of artillery tracers after firing, this one has lost a bit of its redundancy, but obviously still constitutes somewhat of an advantage. To further improve your awareness, there are the so-called direction indicators, which basically function as GPS and alert you when there is an enemy nearby that is trying to sneak up on you. This is obviously very useful if you're engaged in a 1vx fight or if you're tunnel visioning, because there's a complex scenario at hand and forget about your surroundings. Well, this thing is there to alert you of an approaching enemy that is trying to surprise you. Obviously, you can just zoom out and look around, as how I am teaching you in my videos on how to get better at this game, as this thing only works when the enemy tank is spotted by someone, so it isn't there by default, giving you an unfair advantage. But it definitely improves your awareness and you will be less surprised by opponents this way. It's not giving you new information, but it's removing the chance for you to make a mistake. Cheating in World of Tanks is supposed to give you an advantage, but what if there's already a device that does this also? This is the Redmagic 11 Air, and I'm not even exaggerating, this thing feels borderline unfair. I have been testing it in long sessions, and the first thing you notice is not even the performance. It is the design, transparent back and RGB lighting. It literally looks like a mini gaming PC in your hand, but the real difference shows up when you actually start playing. It is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Elite with up to 16GB of RAM, but more importantly, it is very stable, like actually stable. No random frame drops, no overheating halfway through a match, and no sudden performance dips when things get intense. And then you have these shoulder triggers. This is where it changes everything. The response is instant, and in competitive games, that split-second reaction time genuinely gives you an edge. It feels way closer to a controller than a touchscreen. The display is 144Hz, super smooth, super responsive, and it makes fast movements feel way more precise. Pair that with the upgraded cooling system and you can just keep playing without the phone holding you back. The battery is massive too, 7000 mAh, so you're not constantly charging between sessions, and I found that it has really good battery life. With Redmagic OS, game space and the AI features, it actually works as a solid daily phone as well. So no, it is not cheating, but it definitely feels like it. Check out the link in the description and get yourself a Redmagic 11 Air. Thanks to Redmagic for sponsoring this video. Now, Wargaming's stance is extremely clear on these cheat mods and confirms that all mods that reveal the position of enemies or track tracers will get you banned. Now you might be wondering how these mods work. The game already sends partial info, such as tracers, minimap data, to your client, but these mods interpret it more precisely and actively overlay it for you in real time. So you can basically see a fallen tree if you zoom out into commander view across the map, but stuff such as driving over and knocking down small fences isn't normally visible. But with this cheat, it is, and thus obviously it grants an unfair advantage. And then we get to one of the most controversial cheats in the entire game. Tundra, the environment cheat. Now, let's talk about the most famous cheat in World of Tanks, which is called Tundra. It is an environment cheat, and what it does is basically removes foliage such as bushes and trees, granting you an undisturbed line of sight on enemy tanks, which means it spares you the time for having to re-aim because of foliage, saving you a little bit of time that you would normally lose during the aiming process. What it does is it removes foliage, bushes, trees with a couple of keybinds. The cheater can just remove clutter, foliage and bushes and make the enemy tank appear as if he was completely in the open, making aiming and hitting them extremely easy regardless of the surrounding area or range. This one is also pretty broken and it's extremely common because it removes visual clutter, makes enemy targets easier to see and reduces the mental load by not having to account for foliage when aiming. This cheat, however, doesn't change spotting mechanics and it doesn't increase view range, as those are server-sided coded events. This is the kind of advantage that doesn't look obvious but wins fights without you even realizing why. Now let's talk about the thing everyone immediately thinks of when they hear cheating. Aimbots. Aimbots might seem familiar to you from other games, and World of Tanks is no exception, as it also exists in our beloved game. Fortunately, this one isn't so radical as you would think. It basically involves weak spots, getting automatically targeted all the time, and the cheat will literally shoot instead of you. However, this is not going to be a guaranteed hit or pen, since there's a server-side aspect of this, which is called RNG. So basically you can still miss or not pen if RNG decides so. There are various aimbots out there and they will all calculate distance, so when there is a moving target they account for it and lead depending how much velocity your shell has in order to hit the enemy target. What I've noticed is that they use the game's auto aim feature, which you can clearly hear in these clips. So Wargaming could literally get rid of this completely by removing this feature from the game itself. As to how many people would be unhappy because of this, I am not exactly sure. Most aimbots seem incredibly sluggish and way worse compared to how a good player would aim, and therefore I do not think they grant such a cunning edge when it comes to hitting ridiculous shots or being consistent with rapid peeking. What is utterly disgusting, however, is that it does count for moving enemies getting unspotted and also works for artillery. Look at this clip and tell me this is not disgusting. Needless to say, Wargaming explicitly bans for mods that aim at weak spots or calculate lead. But in reality, if you have ever seen aimbotting in other games, it can be insanely brutal to be on the receiving end of cheating, and World of Tanks aimbots are very subtle compared to the ones in other games. Not to mention the fact that you still have to drive to a good position, push in the correct time or leave the flank if it is getting overwhelmed by the enemies. So it is not going to grant you a clear edge unless you are a really bad player or want to eat some ridiculous arty shots. So it's not as OP, but it still removes one of the most important skills in the game. Laser or gun direction mods. Sounds familiar? Yeah, back to that topography laser. So these mods basically show where enemy gun is pointing, which can be super useful to surprise unsuspecting opponents and pick them when they aren't ready to return fire, thus saving valuable HP in the process. It gives you pre-aim advantage, and I think this one can easily influence battles just as much as the Tundra mods. But everything we've talked about so far is nothing compared to what's coming. Data sharing exploit. The most ridiculous cheat, and also probably the rarest, is the data sharing exploit, which many people have covered before me. But if you aren't familiar, you basically launch 2 clients of World of Tanks on your PC, which can be easily done with sandbox applications. You log in on 2 different accounts and you queue up, hoping you will get matched against yourself. Once this happens, the mod allows you to have full vision at all times on the enemy team, since you are getting constant data flow from your other account that is in the same battle, just in the enemy team. This allows players broadcast team positions to another player, which needless to say is pretty game breaking. This essentially breaks the core game mechanic, which is fog of war, and thus creates full map vision, allowing for some ridiculous rounds. This one seems to be extremely rare, however, and used to be way more prominent a few years back. Not sure what the current status of this cheat is and how used it currently is. Bots and rigging. Not all cheating is about playing better. A bot in World of Tanks is essentially an automated script or program that plays the game with minimal or no human input. It works by reading basic game data, like tank positions, enemy proximity, and simple objectives, and then using pre-programmed logic to move, aim, shoot, and navigate maps. More advanced bots may rely on pattern recognition or external overlays to react to what's happening on screen, but they are generally much less adaptable than a real player. People use bots mainly to grind resources such as credits, experience or tech tree progress without having to actively play. This can save time, especially in a game where progression can be slow, but it's considered cheating because it gives an unfair advantage and can harm match quality for others by replacing active players with predictable low-skill bots. And as you can see, sometimes it's about not playing at all. Interesting fact is that some of the bots in the game's topography mode are absolutely brutal, and I challenge you to finish the Prohorovka one with the Tiger, cause I absolutely couldn't. If I lose here, I'm gonna uninstall this game and never play again. Dude! I am losing. How are you supposed to kill this guy? This is so rigged. Look, they are already shooting you. They are already shooting you from the red line. This is, look! Look at this! This is actually unwinnable. Dude, what? You can't win! This is so rigged, man. This is... He never bounces, man. Look, I peek here, I'll die instantly. I'll try and use this cover, man. It's the only thing I can do. Maybe he misses. He missed. Let me do the mission. But I will die now, man. I have no issue. There's no cover here, nothing. I have to track the guy, bro. This is actually hard, man. Like, I'm not joking. The guy on the hill will shoot me, by the way, from here, because I'm within render. In World of Tanks, boosting and rigging are forms of cheating that involve manipulating the outcome of battles rather than automating gameplay. Boosting usually means having a more skilled player log into someone else's account or playing in coordinated groups to artificially inflate stats, win rates, DPG or marks of excellence. The goal is to make an account look more accomplished than it actually is, often for status, resale value, or access to competitive clans. Rigging, on the other hand, involves coordinating with other players, sometimes even on the opposing team, to fix matches. This can include deliberately losing, feeding damage, or queuing at the same time to end up in the same battle and control the outcome. People use rigging to farm specific achievements, medals, complete difficult missions, or boost stats quickly, but it undermines fair play and damages the integrity of the game's matchmaking system. Now a few words about Wargaming's anti-cheat approach. According to their official policy, in World of Tanks, Wargaming defines cheating broadly as anything that provides an unfair advantage through mods or external tools. The wording here is intentionally flexible, which allows them to adapt to new exploits, but also leaves a lot of room for interpretation. So what do they ban? In practice, this includes a range of tools that alter information received during gameplay, such as enemy tracking beyond the intended spotting mechanics, reload timers that remove guesswork, aimbots or aim assistance, transparency or wall hack mods, or bots. The common thread here is removing uncertainty or reducing the skill required to perform well, but critics argue the line between helpful and unfair isn't always clearly defined. So with all of this in mind, what is Wargaming actually doing about all of this? Their punishment system is quite simple. It is a 2-strike system. For the first offense, the cheater gets a temporary ban for a week, and if it's their second offense, they get a permanent ban. Wargaming doesn't disclose much about this topic, except an occasional update on their website when they announce a ban wave. Now, how does Wargaming detect cheats? There is a Reddit thread made by a former cheater who shares his perspective on cheating, and it includes some spicy things, such as him playing over 20,000 battles with cheat mods and getting away unscathed among many other things. It is an interesting read, so I will leave the link in the description. Now, you might ask, can people then actually get away with cheating? This is where things get unclear. Wargaming does not fully disclose how its anti-cheat system works. Officially, they reference things like automated detection and player reports, but beyond that, the system is largely a black box. Back in the day when I used to play in Pro League, we had to use ESL's anti-cheat, ESL Wire, for our matches, as well as provide Python logs to make sure we are not cheating, as well as everybody's replay was checked if the enemy suspected something. As for random battles, I couldn't find much information, so I have no clue how they are detecting cheats and illegal mods. If you have more info, please tell me in the comments, because this is an interesting topic. Finally, there is an ever-existing community divide regarding cheating. In World of Tanks, the community is very split when it comes to cheating. One side claims that cheating is widespread, and I'm sure even you got an occasional "you are cheating" reported to Wargaming with video evidence DM after a successful battle, and this is a result of many believing that cheating is super common. In their minds, getting outplayed and lack of understanding of simple game mechanics can feel like getting cheated. Good players that make outplays can seem too perfect without cheating, and people blame cheats even when they are frustrated. Wargaming doesn't explain much as to how their anti-cheating practices work, so people assume the worst. As well as the grind in the game gives players a reason to cheat. For this side of the community, cheating feels like a real and constant problem. But not everybody agrees, as there is the other side, who claim that cheating is overrated and that it is not as common or useful as many people say. So after all of this, where does that leave us? I will leave it up to you based on this video, so please tell me in the comments if you think these cheats are game breaking or overrated. And also tell me if they have ever happened to you in random battles. I hope you found this topic interesting. I would strongly discourage you trying any of these cheats, not only because of the risk of malware and bad behavior, but also because you could lose an account you've spent years building. Thanks for watching. And special thanks to all of our channel members. You can see their names on the screen right now.